Hello, hi there, Ray. We are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Welcome along.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? I think we did one of these lives into last year, and
Yeah.
we've just been hanging out on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I think the last live was really successful. I think we were talking about a lot of things that were really relevant to the writing community at that time. And I hope that this one will be just as successful and useful for people today.
Yeah, me too. I mean, absolutely nothing has changed in the last 8 months, right? Oh, no way, everything has changed.
I'm just struggling to keep up with what's changed from last week at the moment. It's fast moving, definitely.
It is. Well, hello to everyone out there. Thanks for joining us. Rather than ask where you're from or what you write, let's ask about stories because that's what we're here to talk about today. Maybe you can drop in the chat one of your favorite authors, writers, or stories from your background. I think we've got about 20 people in the room already, so that's cool. And maybe Ray, I can ask you, who are some of your favorite storytellers or favorite stories?
Oh, favorite story of all time. Ooh, let's phrase it like this: stories that changed my life. There are some stories that got me into reading that I absolutely love. So, Noughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman. Um, the Thief Lord, and the author is escaping me at the moment, but these were two stories. Mallory Blackman's Noughts and Crosses is a series that opened my eyes to the power of storytelling and escapism via stories. So I think those two are the two that really changed my approach and view on stories. What about yourself? What are your favorites and standouts for you?
I'm a short story guy, so I like a lot of short story writers. I mean, yes, all the classics, Hemingway and that. Really like Italo Calvino. He's got some, and Borges, like some philosophical type stories, but I'm reading more non-fiction and novels these days as well.
Mhm.
Someone I can mention who I absolutely love is Barbara Kingsolver. She
Okay.
writes big tomes, stories which really roll on, but she recently rejigged David Copperfield by uh, Charles Dickens for a modern audience, and it's set in like hillbilly Virginia. It's absolutely amazing, really
Nice.
long book, but can't recommend Barbara Kingsolver enough. So check out her work if you can.
Love it. Yeah. I'm reading a lot of World War II uh, at the moment and discovering World War II via fiction based on true stories. So it's a way for me. I feel like if I was taught history in the sense of storytelling in school, I would have been able to absorb this information so much more. And only now am I suddenly learning about history in a way that's actually sticking, and it's via fiction. So that's
It's
what I'm
it's a good
currently.
point. It's a good point you make about education and school, and I think so many people are so burned and tired out and fed up of literature at school because
Yeah.
they sort of delve into the mechanics of like what things mean and literary techniques at school and are all sick to death of Shakespeare and translating things. But we never really find out like what is a story. I think
Yeah.
that's such a key question. It'd be cool to have a course on it. Like, what's a story? Let's get into stories rather than let's study, particular meter in poetry. It's like,
Yeah.
why not
Even if
figure out
the
like why the poem's great?
even if the approach to teaching was more storytelling led, I feel like I would have been able to absorb a lot more information than um, the nonfiction route that we were taught, or the route that was like study these rather than let's learn via stories.
Sure.
But yeah,
All right.
another
Well,
webinar for another time.
I know we could probably do one of these every day, but that wouldn't be good for business, right? Anyway, what are we going to talk about today? Storytelling. It's entitled this lovely webinar, Can Content Writers Find Their Happily Ever After? So we're talking about stories and storytelling, particularly for content writers. That's something Ray knows a lot about because he runs content agency DSLX. I am a content writer myself, and I coach content writers. That's who I am, to do a little bit of an introduction. And yeah, we're going to talk through a few hows and whys. First thing, and please ask questions if you have them. We're going to chat for about 40 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time to answer questions. If you're watching this on replay, just drop your question below wherever you find this video, and we'll get back to you. Wonderful. First question is this, Ray. What is the difference to you between stories and storytelling? Is there a difference? Does it matter?
A slight difference, I guess. When you look at the word stories and what stories are, stories come in our everyday. We're living within stories. There are micro stories happening around us. We see stories in fiction, in non-fiction, but off the page, and we're creating stories and we relay stories. And then as we relay stories, that goes into what storytelling is, and storytelling being a skill. You will always notice that some of the most popular people in a room at a party are the ones that are telling a great story. So storytelling is that act of being able to convey a story or something that's happened around you in a way that really absorbs someone, and in a way that transports someone to within that story effectively. And I don't think that's something that everyone can do. It's a skill that it's either a raw talent, but it's definitely a skill that you adapt and you build on. And it's something that a lot of writers are now having to really focus on in their content, definitely.
Yeah, I suppose I asked because I guess you're saying storytelling is like the application of imparting your work with stories. And yeah, as you say, that's something writers have to work on. I think sometimes the word storytelling is the technique, and people focus a bit too much on the technique, the strategy, the framework, the template, rather than getting to the heart of the matter. So I mean, that's my opinion on. I think we should think first of stories and second of storytelling, but perhaps it's semantics.
Yeah, I also think it's the angle that you're going to take to any piece of content as well. Do you have a good story to be telling in the first place? Is there a story here? What's the approach that you're taking to this story? Perhaps if you're struggling to write a piece, there's no story in the first place. And maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and think, okay, what's my approach? What's my angle here? Why isn't this flowing? And that's because there's no story behind it. You've just been told to write a list of features or something like that. So I think it's identifying that you have something worth saying in the first place, and then crafting that into a good piece of content.
Yeah, so much to get into in terms of having something to say.
Yeah.
AI, SEO versus sort of SEO content versus an article. Let's start with why anyone wants stories. I think we know why people want stories, but why do brands want stories? Why do agencies or brands who require content, why do they need stories?
So this is really interesting because we had a potential client come to us a couple of months ago, and normally clients come to us with goals around, okay, we want to drive X amount of clicks, X amount of impressions, X amount of new leads, signups, whatever that is. And this client came to us maybe a month ago. So we're still in talks with them. And one of their biggest goals was to build a lovable brand. And I was like, okay, this is really refreshing. I love that you want to do this. I don't know how we're going to quantify this goal, but in terms of what this goal was, I was like, why do you want to build a lovable brand? And they said, when everything on the table is the same, so all of your features are the same for a SaaS brand, for example, all of your features are the same, all of the costs are the same, the UI, UX is more or less the same. Someone is going to opt for the brand that they like more. So brands today are trying to be that lovable, positive sentiment brand, because that is often the final deciding factor when all of technology and price points are the same, is which one do you feel like you want to go with more? And a surefire way to get that positive emotion from someone is via storytelling, and that enables you to build a more lovable brand.
Totally. I mean, so many TV ads stick a family in there to say, look, people, you should care about people. You should love us because we love our family, and so do you. I mean, it's tried and tested. That's what we need to care about things. Just a quick note to say, I can't see your comments coming in on the streaming software, but I know people are writing them because I can see them on LinkedIn. So bear with me. I'm just going to read a couple out because thanks for commenting. Sharon said her go-to writers are Martina Cole and Michael Connolly. Nice.
Yeah, great, Sharon.
Thafa or Thafa, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry. I hope I got one of those right. Murakami, Orhan Pamuk, yes, Turkish writer, and Franz Kafka. Oh, that's a great array of literature there. Ella is reading A Little Life right now.
Oh, Ella, that's rough. That story broke me.
This is by Hanya Yanagihara.
Yeah.
I'm not sure
Possibly one of the saddest books of all time. My goodness.
Oh, that sounds right up my alley. Great. Well, thanks for your comments. I will keep checking LinkedIn and try and answer your questions. So do get them in if you've got anything to ask Ray or myself. Right. So we've sort of answered brands and stories. I guess that kind of touches on what we talked about at the start, stories or storytelling. Like if brands have real stories rather than, hey, we're using storytelling to try and flog some soap or something, I guess that's what slightly triggers me. It's like, let's get back to the heart of the matter and think about stories that matter. And if you've got those, people will pay attention and people will care and people will like what you're doing if that resonates.
Yeah, and I don't think it's very hard for a brand to have a story, a business to have a story. It has to, most oftentimes, has to resonate from the people behind the business. And I think that's a success that we've really had with DSLX, is it's been driven from my personal story, and that's why we have evolved into the business that we are today. So I think brands are sometimes scrambling to find their story. What it needs to come back to is their mission, vision, and values of, okay, why did this brand start in the first place? And when they're not comfortable enough to put their own people in the center of stories, then it goes to their customers. Their customers have fantastic stories, have success stories, have failures, have ways that they use the particular business's product. So it's finding those stories and sharing them instead, as long as they're all in line with the same mission or share the same values. So I think that's the struggle that a lot of businesses are trying to figure out these days, is what on earth is our story? And rightly so, it doesn't have to come from the actual business. It should come from the people behind the business or the people you're working with. Those are where the stories are, with real people.
Such a great point. That's where it starts, isn't it? Because you say, what's our mission? Or it's something that somebody in the marketing department made up. And they use lots of buzzwords to help make it palatable for B2B stuff, but it goes back to people. Great point about either people in your business or customers, or maybe even the advertising mascot. The person, the persona, or the what's the avatar of your brand. Like Mr. Mustard or Barry Scott. Don't know why I'm thinking of cleaning things, but I never forget that. Do you remember Sill It Bang?
Oh yeah, years ago.
Really cheesy, awful advertising campaign. But there's this guy who comes on screen. He shouts, "Hi, I'm Barry Scott." and everyone's going, "Who's Barry Scott?
Yeah.
Who are you?" But it made everyone really interested in like why he was selling run, and he was just somebody that they made up. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, here's the guy that sells our product.
It's great. And I think you see it when we go down the mascot route. You can see it in the US with big major league football, basketball teams. They all have these mascots, which are these furry animals that are the real heart and character of the team. And those mascots that people fall in love with and associate with a team of people that they may not really know so well. So they're enabling them to build and share their story and build a lovable brand in terms of like a lovable team. Because some of these teams look pretty scary, but you can relate to that big, lovable, furry bear that's running up and down the aisles breakdancing. So it's just figuring out how and who with to tell a story with. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't so sure about the Olympics mascot this year.
Oh, I didn't see it.
It was like a hat. It's like they just put eyes on a hat. And I was
Oh, I
like,
didn't see that one. Didn't get very good coverage because probably wasn't telling a very good story.
well, it's a strange one for me because if you put let's say if you got a car and you put eyes on a car, well, it becomes the character becomes something. But if you put eyes on a piece of clothing, a piece of clothing is already connected to a person. So it just seemed like a strange one to me. But
Yeah.
anyway, getting off track. Right, let's get back to storytelling. I'm just going to check in with some of the comments while I ask you this, Ray. What about AI and storytelling?
Yeah.
Can it be useful?
Tough. AI. So, okay, let's backtrack to last year when AI was released to the general public and founders were dropping, cutting marketing teams saying, we can just do everything with AI. And then let's fast forward to this year when AI is nowhere near as ready and able to craft the quality that so many businesses are looking to craft and have now gone back to freelance writers and consultants and rebuilt marketing teams after the AI flop. I think now what we're seeing is marketing teams are able to adopt AI as soundboards when it comes to storytelling. They're able to pepper AI into their processes. So, for example, AI could run a line edit, could build off of an idea, or could analyze previous blog articles and then give new ideas, mass analyzing of data, that sort of thing. AI's ability to tell stories is still nowhere near the standard that businesses want and readers require today. It's very obvious still, no matter how much prompting or how well trained you have an AI, that it is written by AI. And the one thing that AI is never going to be able to do is be a human. So what I've started to see a lot more of from brands this year, and actually a project that I'm really excited about doing with a particular client, is first person content and building out writer profiles to say, oh, this piece is written by Philip. Great. I know Philip is an expert on X, Y, and Z. I've read Philip's work before. I now know I'm going to enjoy this read. And AI is not going to you're not going to read a piece, see it's authored by AI and be like, I can't wait to read this because I relate to Philip and I know Philip's story and I want to continue learning or reading with Philip. So I think AI is definitely becoming adopted into processes and any process, marketing processes, writing processes. But in terms of helping build lovable brands, there's no person behind it to say that. So it's failing many businesses if they are trying to build entire stories with AI.
Yeah, for me, the crux is that the mechanical process that generative AI uses is by assessing what is there, by
Yeah,
assessing things which exist, right? Lines of text and subjects and things which it can process, rehash, and put out as something new. That's fine, but stories, the reader generates 50%, certainly up to 50% of the meaning. The real alchemy of stories is what's not there. and what the reader thinks for themselves. And as a tool, however much data ChatGPT and the like can process, it doesn't matter because
Yeah.
they cannot impart meaning between the lines of text.
Yeah. 100%. And
That for me is why they may improve at mimicking certain story structures, but they will never create a story.
exactly, they're able to recreate, not innovate. And a big problem with specifically ChatGPT, it's a language processing model, so it's learning off of all of the data that it has access to and all of the stories that it has access to. And the problem that has happened in the past is that we have notoriously written for algorithms over people. So it's learning from data sets that are outdated and actually not that great. It's only in the last year or 2 years are we really starting to be able to tell true stories, and Google recognize them and recognize their value in them. But in terms of ChatGPT specifically, what it's learning from is the best of a bad bunch. It's only now that we're really starting to innovate and tell stories in a new way that are things getting exciting, and ChatGPT is not learning from that yet. So yeah, I think it's gone to a bad school of us writing for algorithms over anything else in the past.
That's very true. I mean, stories are written for people.
Mm-hmm.
If you write this great story with this meaning that the reader has to impart, a machine doesn't like that because it's not pure reason that it can process and put out something else or understand. So, in my view, stuff which is written for an algorithm like LinkedIn's collaborative articles or pure SEO how-tos are not where we should be going. But
Yeah.
who am I to say? Right, I'm just looking through a bit of a list of questions that we've got next, and I can see some of your questions have come in. I've saved them and I'm continually refreshing, so keep asking things and we'll get to them after our chat. All right, so we've talked about AI. I guess what everyone here is here to know is, can content writers find their happily ever after? Hopefully, yes. How? How can they do that? How can they develop story skills?
Yeah. I think being able to write good stories, or having the license to write great stories and getting the creative freedom to write great stories, comes from having experience and comes from having the kind of reputation for a client to come to you and say, we trust you to do this, go ahead. And that's when you can start experimenting. That's when you can start being playful. That's when you can start theorizing and publishing and then proving your worth. It's taken DSLX 3 years to develop our skills, push, get our reputation, for us to finally be able to say, really, clients to come to us and say, we trust you to do this. We've seen you do it for other brands. Please get on with it. And that's like true creative freedom that we're getting now, and being able to craft good stories. But until you get there, you have to prove your point. And that comes from like studying, that comes from reading a lot, that comes from writing even more, and publishing, getting your name on every piece of work, so that you're building a real reputation for yourself online as a great storyteller. Even when you're not writing or not able to write for a client, you should be writing for yourself and publishing your work for yourself. What do you think?
I think one of the key skills, like what people tend to study, is the nuts and bolts. They're like, how do I write good dialogue? How do I, create a great description? Those all add to your writing, but unless you learn about story structure, they're just nice writing. That you still won't be writing stories. I think one of the key things to learn about is scene and summary. What is a scene and what is a summary?
Nice.
Because beginner writers often think that they write things like, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then we went here, and that happened, the end. and nobody cares because everything is happening all around us.
Yeah.
But we process our experience on this planet through story, and we care about scenes. We care about like observing something meaningful happening in one place at one time. So being able to transcribe that really helps. I would say one way of doing that is by transcribing a scene, one of your favorite scenes from TV, right? If it's
Mm.
a scene from Seinfeld or from Mad Men or from Breaking Bad or TV shows which don't come from America, take the scene and like write it out in your own words. What's happening? What are the characters doing? Like if you can apply that to your own writing, people care. Like
Yeah.
drop them into the middle of the scene. I think that's such a more arresting way to get people to care than what is an X at the start of a blog post.
Yeah. I think one thing that I harp on about a lot, especially in the academies, in the art of storytelling course that we have, I think is the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And so many great films and books follow this hero's journey to an extent. And when you can begin to identify these various, I think there's 17 chapters or parts of the hero's journey, when you can begin to identify these in blogs that you're reading, in films that you're watching, Disney's notorious for it, then you're able to map them out in your own content. And this hero's journey is designed to take us as readers on an arc and a real story that you're engrossed in. It's a proven formula for story success. So perhaps you don't need to do all 17 in your blog process. It's a lot, right? Especially if we're writing like 1,000-word blogs, but definitely highlighting, okay, this is my hero. This is before the call to action. This is my hero in the midst of things. This is my hero returning. And whether your hero is your reader, whether your hero is your product, whether your hero is someone that you're writing about, if you can identify and plot loosely to that hero's journey, it's a great starting point for someone that is looking to focus on storytelling.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. So we're talking about content writing specifically for
Yeah.
blogs. If you've got a 600-word blog or a 1,500-word blog, you can't apply like a complex movie or novel structure to that. What
Yeah.
are some? I know you just mentioned a hero's journey and how you can apply that in a loose way. What are some other possible techniques to use?
Yeah. If we're getting really into the nitty gritty of things, I think language techniques that are often used in stories to create more beautiful prose can be put into your blog content. So, language techniques being simple things like alliteration, so words beginning with the same letter. It can also be lists of three, which is famous in script writing and speech writing, especially as being really effective and more memorable. Language techniques like sibilance and assonance. So, how you get certain words to sound in the reader's head can help create an emotion within that reader's head. For example, sibilance words, so words sounding like with a sound, tend to be associated more strongly towards evil characters or more malicious intent. So when you are in your blog writing and you're wanting to create perhaps a more negative tone or a more sinister tone, then you can play on a language technique like sibilance. But there are tons of great language techniques that you can embed into your blogs that you'll notice as you're starting to read stories and say, oh, why don't I borrow from that? For example, foreshadowing or motifs, or is it in media res, like when you drop someone directly into the middle of the action. So all of these great fiction storytelling tactics can easily convert over to a blog piece that you're able to generate emotions quicker, really make the reader sit up, rather than a I don't know, streaming tool is AX, for example. Like, let's borrow more from storytelling.
I mean, I'm already smiling, so I'm thinking I want to read those blogs rather than the boring, functional stuff that we often read because we have a query and we want the answer. But if you can get people onto a page, keep them there, and make them like what you're doing, and using these story techniques and literary techniques does that. It's just that's how to, for me, reach the upper echelons of the writing industry. So that's why I think it's such a key skill.
Yeah, and I think a lot of businesses need these how-tos, right? They want to be able to share these how-to articles because that's what their customers, their potential customers, are looking for. They want to be educated, but how you do the how-to is what's important. So I don't think we're saying like don't do how-to articles, but it's how to do the how-to articles is what matters here. And another thing that jumped to my mind there while you were talking, think about when you finish a chapter in a good fiction piece of storytelling, and the reason you want to carry on reading the next chapter is because the previous chapter was left on a cliffhanger. Why are we not doing this in our blogs? Why are we not leaving our readers with a little bit more, wanting to see that little bit more before we go on to our next section? Because that's their break otherwise, and that's when they're likely to jump. So how can you cliffhang your way through a blog piece so that readers stick and carry on reading, even maybe once they've got the information that they came for? So yes, it's how you write these stories. It's not specifically the subject of them.
Yeah, great technique to get someone to click the next page or the next blog. Couple of points I had on this of techniques that writers can use that I've just noted down. I would say don't use story bait. That is saying, "Hey, I've got this great story. Hey, find out this." I mean, it's a bit like clickbait, but it's starting with a story and not returning to it. You have to close the loop on stories at the very least. If you've got a story in your blog post, start with it, touch on it in the middle, and close the loop at the end. I mean, that's a fairly simple structure of make sure it's in the piece 3 times. Otherwise, it's clear that you've just done it to get eyeballs and not because it's a real satisfying story. A couple of other things, ABAB, going from a scene in a story to an explanation of what it means, back to the scene, back to an explanation. Just it's like a jigsaw, interspersing story with functional content. Add a bit of dialogue. Just let us listen to the voices of people involved in that product, story, or piece of information. And yeah, I'd say 3 things that a story needs to be a story. Maybe 4 actually, but 3 things for me definitely: character, conflict, and resolution.
Yes.
If you're missing one of those things, it's flat out not a story. I could go into more detail about that, but I hope you get that. And also, finally, add change. The shorter the story you write, that becomes the focus. It's just some moment of change. So let's say you're writing a social media post and it's only 200 words long. Well, you don't have a lot of time to introduce a big flowing story with a lot of resolution. But if you can show some kind of change in the character, I think that at least lets the reader write their own story and make conclusions on that. So just to recap, character, conflict, resolution, and possibly change, all things to include when you're writing stories.
Yeah,
in whatever format.
I'll build on that character note that you have as well. So I studied creative writing, English literature and creative writing, and we did a lot of storytelling during that course. And one thing we really focused on was round and flat characters. So stories have flat characters, and flat characters are people or things that just progress the plot, but are not thick enough for you to want to dive in and imagine that they have a whole story on their own. And then you have round characters. So round characters are characters that you can really dive into and are have enough of a character to be able to hold their own story. For example, if you were to do a sequel or something like that. So when you are writing any blog post, and especially when it comes to B2B SaaS, these don't necessarily need to be people. Maybe they're things, maybe they're features, maybe they're products or events, but identify what's flat and what's round. What is there to just move your blog along, and what is there to be a real standout hero that can have its own blog post in the future. That's what I would really call on in terms of characters. And then another huge thing, especially when it comes to LinkedIn posts, for example, and shorter storytelling. And this is something that I quite recently learned actually from a podcast called Innovators Can Laugh. I can't remember the person that came on the podcast, but I was listening to it the other day. I really enjoy it. And he was talking about finding a villain. And so, okay, so identify who or what this villain is, and addressing that villain and getting everyone on the same side as you, and it's you against the villain. So it really rallies your reader up and enables you to write better stories. And I've done since then some social posts on really identifying a villain, and they've done really, really well. So I think it's when you can highlight who or what a villain is and get people on the same side, suddenly it generates a lot more engagement with it. So
people love to hate. That is for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. My villain is never a person, by the way. It's normally a tool or a problem or a pain point that we can all relate to hating. So that's something that I think you can definitely do in brand storytelling, is highlight a problem, and that's your villain, and then you get your reader on the same side as that.
Yeah, I was gonna mention, obviously don't include the villain as like, oh, this creator, don't we all hate
No,
him?
absolutely not. This is harsh.
But yeah, like an institution as well, like
Yeah.
the government, imposing this annoying thing on everyone. That is something which is common ground for everyone, and is an institution or a societal problem can be a
Mhm.
great villain. Good point. And let's say writers start to apply all of our wonderful advice and use these techniques and start to craft stories in their social posts, in their content, in their blogs. How do they know if they're doing it well? What can writers do to maybe get feedback or understand if the stories they are writing are working?
Mhm. So I'll speak from DSLX's experience. Two things. One is preface your article for your editor on what you're hoping to achieve with your article. When you work with an editor, a lot of the times the editor is working to get a finished product and is perhaps focusing more heavily on line edits or grammar edits, or maybe even structure. But if you can set your editor up to say, hey, I'm trying to achieve this with this blog. Do you think I've done it? Then that editor edits in another way. And something that we always do at DSLX is we edit to upskill. We don't edit to just finish a piece of work. So let your editor know, I'm trying to craft a story here. Do you feel like you've gone on a story with me? How can I improve this? Submit your piece. Then you're more likely to get feedback from your editor that is more in line with the educational experience that you're looking for. That would be my first piece of advice. And my second piece of advice is engagement metrics and actual numbers on blog engagement within the page once it's published, completion rates, time on page, bounce rates, things like that. How did you hook your reader from the beginning? Did your reader make it to the end? Did your reader love you so much that they clicked on your author bio rather than like another internal link? So those engagement metrics really enable you to understand if you've been successful in crafting a piece that tells a story.
Great tips, especially that first one. Really like that of setting out your your purpose. What is this? Who's it for? What's your purpose? And if you can let your editor know that, they're going to help you so much more. Definitely see that. I get work sent to me and I'm like, yeah, but what is this? What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
So yes, I would advise my clients to do that for me as well. What was I going to say? I just had something to add to that. Yes, let's say there are freelancers or people who are pitching to publications. How do they know if their work is improving or being good? Being an effective story, my advice would be to get feedback from a writing buddy. If you don't have a mentor, then buddy up with somebody to swap critiques. Good places to do that can be free community groups or paid community groups. I'm biased because I run a paid community group and so does Ray, so I'm sure it'd say the same. But paid community groups are great because it shows that people are backing themselves and people are putting in the effort to actually show up and use it and get value from it. I think the danger of free community groups is I can't tell you how many free Facebook groups I'm in, but hundreds, and I never visit them because why? There's thousands of people in there spamming and not really putting in much effort, but hoping to get something from the group. So, in a nutshell, buddy up with a writer, try and swap critiques, get feedback, and join a group. That would be my suggestions.
Yeah, we have this buddy system within our writers at DSLX. So we're a team of 7 people, and we've created like writer bubbles within DSLX. So writers are able to now give each other feedback on their own work, and they're kind of buddying up on different clients. So if you are a solo freelancer, then 100% these communities are fantastic for you. But if you're working in a team internally and you have other freelancers, other writers that are in-house with you, then look at your resources that are sitting next to you and ask, hey, do you want to start formalizing our working relationship a little bit more? And do you want to buddy up more on giving each other feedback? These communities don't just exist. They exist for freelance writers in these spaces that me and you have created, but they can also exist in the business that you're working in as well if you're an in-house writer.
Great. Let's move on to some questions because we are running out of time. We're only going to be here for 10 more minutes or so. So if you've got a question, get it in now. Got a few questions. I think this one, I can't share it on the screen, but I'll have to just read it out, is from Safa. He says, are there experiences or moments in life that defy narrative? Or can a story always be found even in the seemingly mundane? Brilliant question. I absolutely love this. Ray, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. This is interesting. So I went on a meditation retreat recently on the jhanas, and these experiences that some people were having on the retreat, these almost like enlightenment experiences, people were saying, I don't think there's words for me to be able to convey what happened or the journey that I went on. And I think that's really interesting because stories at the end of the day are limited to language, and perhaps you've experienced something that is beyond a language or doesn't have a word or description. So I think a true storyteller's biggest task is being able to translate an experience that happens into vocabulary that everyone has access to. And I think especially as you start to learn more languages, you realize that maybe there is a definition for this, but it's just not in your language. It's in this language over here. And yeah, that's a storyteller's biggest task, I think, is transcribing an experience that is without words and putting it in a way that someone else can enjoy it.
Well, I mean, we should remember there are different mediums for for stories as well. It doesn't have to be the written words. I mean, there's possibly a better way to tell a story than by writing it. In answer to your question, I would say yes, there are possibly moments in life that defy narrative. Not everything should be a story, but I would say everything can be a story. It's about how you format the events that happened to you or around you into a narrative. As I said earlier, the way that we experience the world and all of the chaos that has happened in the past, present, and will happen in the future is through ordering things into a narrative. So it takes practice and skill to do that. But if you ask me to tell a story about the last 1,000 years inside of a tennis ball and there's nothing going on, I could probably write a story because I would format something into an interesting narrative, but don't hold me to task on that. I probably won't be publishing a post on it anytime soon. Another question. Forgive me, I think this is from Sharon. I think the question is, I'm just going to paste this so Ray can see it as well. Here's the question. You can see it in the LinkedIn comments. Yeah, thanks for your question, Sharon. The question is, do you prefer using a certain framework to help structure your story for a client? For example, the PAB framework, or do you just research and use your story as the guide?
That's tough because certain clients that we work with require certain flows. So whether they're more heavily focused on SEO or not, our SEO research often tends to structure or at least provide the bare bones of any article that we write. And then it's up to us to thread our story through that. However, what we really tend to do when we're going through a new piece of content is what is the logical flow for their headspace and the knowledge set that we expect the reader to have by the time they reach this article. So what do they need to know up top? And what can they now learn or discover now that they've read the up top part? And it's more of applying a common sense educational journey to your piece of content over us saying like it has to deliver this framework, this framework, this framework. We get that down, and then we'll try to identify like, okay, what's the is the narrative clear here or not? Are we taking this user on a journey or not? And especially in the wrap up is like, okay, what have we achieved what we set out to achieve on this piece? So I don't think that we have a specific framework that works every time. Different clients will have different demands, but it's really applying, does this logically make sense for the knowledge level that we expect the reader to have entering the piece and for where we want them to be leaving the piece, and how can we get them from A to B in a way that they enjoy?
My approach is to have a goal, to have a target, and work backwards from that. And I think that's a good tip for certainly for content writing, because if you don't know what that goal is, it's like you might write a load of stuff which nobody cares about or is a waste of time. So I mean, get that goal, get that purpose, work backwards from it, and you can even do that with the story. Like, what do you want people to feel? What do you want the ending to be like? And work backwards. And I think then the framework will fall into place. Like, how can you best deliver that in the easiest, smartest way for readers? If you try and build things up, like, oh, hey, I've got this idea, and build things up little by little, you can easily go off track, because where are you going towards? So I would recommend to work backwards.
Definitely.
Thanks for your questions, everyone. I think we've got one more question to answer. This was from Ansan. Thanks for your question. And he asks, are there standards to follow when posting content on LinkedIn?
I think there were, and I think they've changed. I think if you had asked me this maybe 2 months ago, I would have said, yeah, post popular opinions or
Hot takes.
hot takes. Yeah. And they were very clickbait with the Seymour situation, and that's what was working. And now people have really died out to that and are really tired of it. So I think what I see work now, we manage a lot of LinkedIn accounts for our clients, businesses and people. So what I see working now is real world stuff that's just happened. Um, Especially on my own LinkedIn, I will be posting stuff that happened that day or yesterday. And I'm like, this is a struggle that we're going with, or this is a situation that I'm currently dealing with. So I think really topical and relevant and hyper relevant to the poster is what's working at the moment on LinkedIn. There are a couple of trends as well that you can jump on for fun. They come and go as quick as English weather. But I think if you're just staying relevant to your own journey and your own story, people relate to that and engage with that more than if you're trying to clickbait someone now. You'll get left behind real quick if you're following how we were posting like 2 months ago.
Sure. I mean, I think stories and social media content don't necessarily marry up exactly. My 2 cents would be, as for LinkedIn, understand where the line is. There is an invisible line about what is and isn't acceptable to talk about, whether that's topics or ways to do it
Yeah.
or language to use. And as much as you can push that line, push it, because that stops you being boring. And my
Yeah.
second point is don't be boring. Most of the things that we see online are really boring. So just don't be boring. Like, there are loads of different ways to do that. It can be with language, with techniques, with the topic that you're talking about, with telling stories. But just imagine your post, whether it's for a company or for yourself, appearing in a feed. Would you scroll past it and just be like, boring? It has to be really exciting to not be boring. So, yeah, just please don't be boring.
I agree with that. And I think that people need to remember when they're posting on LinkedIn as themselves, that's the most creative freedom you're ever going to get. So enjoy it and go wild. You are not writing for anyone else's guidelines. You're writing for yourself, and you're writing for potential clients that are going to see you. And behind the businesses, there are also humans that are scrolling on LinkedIn that will end up working with you. So if you can make someone laugh, smile, sit forward, engage, the only way you're really going to be able to do that is by really writing as yourself and not worrying about what other people will think. Just put it out there, just publish the post, and throw any guideline out the window. And then one
Yeah.
small technical thing I would say on LinkedIn with posts is you have a fantastic ability to use color in the form of emojis. And I think that use them with caution and care, but some colors really pop as you scroll through a LinkedIn feed. So identify what those are for you, and they can really help grab someone's eyes as they're scrolling, like strong reds or greens, yellows and oranges. Really make someone a little bit more alert. So I'm not saying do strings of emojis, but keep that in mind if you want to really emphasize a particular line or starting your post.
And then when people get used to you posting emojis in a certain way, you've got to change it up to
Get
not
rid
be
of them.
boring,
Yeah.
because you've got to constantly change it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ray, for coming on. It has been great chatting with you, as ever. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question, I'm sorry, but we will do that at some point in the future. We'll answer your comment in the chat section, or just DM us. You can get hold of me by Googling English Writing Coach on most platforms. I should show up. Ray, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm usually most active there. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn.
Great. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. I wish you success with all of your stories, and I hope to see lots more story-based content and posts so we can all live happily ever after. Have a great rest of your day, Ray, and I'll
Thank
catch you
you.
up on next time.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.